This is Hospitality and Politics. I am Andrew Ridgie. This show is powered by the New York City Hospitality Alliance, and I'm very excited for my guest today because there's so many amazing places across New York that I love going. But the person I am speaking with is the creator of one of my most favorite places and so many other people's favorite place, John Wang of the Queens Night Market. What's going on?
Not much, but happy to be here.
Cool. So where do I even start? I guess I feel like people know, but if they don't know, they should know. What is the Queens Night Market?
So the Queens Night Market is New York City's first night market. I think it was maybe the US's second night market. And we launched in 2015 with the idea to be New York City's most affordable and most accessible and most representative community space in New York. It was inspired a little bit by the night markets in Taiwan, where I'd spent a bit of time as a kid. But most of every element of the Queens Night Market is for New York City, inspired by New York City, for New Yorkers.
So when you go there, I mean, it's pretty cool. Can you just describe like the location, and then I'm going to give some of my narrative because I have a few thoughts of like what I find really unique and exciting about it. But just from the person who founder and manages it, like where is it? When is it? What does it look like?
Sure. So the Queens Night Market is in Flushing Meadows, Corona Park, on the west side, closer to the Corona side. Our landlord is the New York Hall of Science. Mm-hmm. They have a huge lawn behind them, about something like 400,000 square feet. Mm-hmm. We now have grown to occupy most of it, most of that 400,000 square feet. On any given night, you'll find about 75 independent local food stalls, about 35 local art merchandise stalls. And the two things I think that are most popular about the Queens Night Market, one is our emphasis on affordability. So since 2015 and 2016, when we launched, no food you could buy at the market cost more than $5. In 2017, we raised that to $6, where it's been since. In New York City, that sort of becomes more valuable every year.
Talking about affordability, it's one of the few places that is affordable and accessible to most people to go get a good meal when you compare the cost of eating, whether going to the grocery store or going to a restaurant elsewhere. It's
right. I don't know if it's an advantage, but this was sort of a passion project. It was never a sort of profit machine. It was never intended to be a cash cow. So baked into the very foundation of making the Queens Night Market was about affordability. And when your entire organization is built around one pillar, you do everything you can to stay there.
Yeah.
So it is our sort of one of our two probably defining qualities. And the other one is about representing New York through our vendors. And, we curate specifically to maximize the representation of our vendors and New Yorkers through our vendors. And so to this day, we've represented about 104 countries through our vendors and their food.
Wow.
So there's an intersection of affordability and sort of incredibly diverse representation of New Yorkers. If you go, it's just a horde of people, up to 20, 25,000 people a Saturday. And what I take away most from it is that it's about 20 to 25,000 happy New Yorkers, which is a pretty rare sight.
Yeah. Well, when you pull in, I would think I see like the lot and cars are parked and everything and people are walking in, and then you walk into the area and it's like, if you're walking in on the left, there's this field area where people are hanging out. It kind of looks like a picnic. They're doing different things. And then the right is just all the stalls, all the vendors, and you just see so many different types of people, ethnicities, ages, family with kids, with grandparents, just every, type of person you can imagine. Then you like walk through and you see all the vendors, and it's as diverse as all the people, who are there. And it's such an incredible experience to get so much diversity of cuisine and culture in one place in a way where it all flows together so well. Sometimes I feel like when you take people and foods from so many different countries and so many different cultures, and you just kind of like put them in a field, in Queens, you could imagine it could be a little like disconjointing, but it's not at all? I mean, did that just happen organically, or is there something that you've done in kind of the planning and management to allow it all to kind of flow in this really harmonious way?
Oh, I could take credit, but I'm sure some of it or a lot of it is probably a happy accident. But it was always the goal to say, I don't know how much part I played in reaching that goal or inching towards it.
Yeah.
But inspiration was really, as I said, the night markets from Taiwan, where I was first introduced as a kid. And to me, the feeling I got from it was that the entire city had descended. I mean, they can be incredibly crowded and sort of like huge lines. They are affordable. But most importantly to me was that the feeling that the entire city had come, like whether you were, a billionaire living in a penthouse or someone, living essentially in a closet space kind of thing. And it was accessible enough, both price point wise, but experientially, that it always felt harmonious in that exact way you're talking about. So that was, when I say New York City's most welcoming, most affordable, sort of most representative space, that was the intention. I didn't know how to, I had a theory about how to get there, and it was really the biggest emphasis was on affordability.
Yeah.
Right. So like there's so many income gaps in New York City. To me, the subway was the closest metric of like, back when it was cheaper, of like, how do you get all the people, how do you make it worth their while to go on the same plate or, in the same space? So for me, it was like the subway was like, that was the one place in New York City where, you had, of course, some billionaires take their helicopters, but leaving those aside, the subway was both affordable, but also the most efficient. And so you'd see this sort of mix of New Yorkers in the subway. That was sort of what I tried to replicate at the Queens Night Market.
I like that. That's how you see it. Like I feel like if you're on the train,
as you go through the neighborhoods,
like going through neighborhoods, that's kind of like the demographics too at the night market.
Right. And so there's that one. The piece was affordability, because that's just sort of the greatest equalizer, I think. The second one was the genesis behind the idea of curating to maximize representation. I think, a lot of these, food events, community events, all that kind of stuff, for good reason, end up focusing on a specific culture or region or localized representation, which is great. You're serving an audience, a very specific target audience. But my entire goal of the Queens Night Market is how to get rid of the theory of target demographics. How do you actually appeal to everyone? And so it was, I think the onus was on me to create a sort of a market where everyone felt comfortable and found something that they actually wanted or recognized. And to segue a little bit, my favorite stories coming out of the night market are, they happen time and time again, is grandkids want to take their grandparents to the Queens Night Market.
Cool
and the grandparents are always like, no. I love my, enclave in Queens. I love my enclave in Staten Island or whatever it is. Why would I venture out there? I won't recognize anything. It'll be expensive. I just won't have a good time. And the kids are like, no. We promise you'll find something there that you recognize that will remind you a little bit about of home, wherever that is. And eventually they get them out there, and they've, and then the grandparents go to the first stall that sort of they're comfortable eating. And then they have their opinions about whether it's any good or not. But then, they're already stuck there. And then the grandparents are forced to sort of like branch out and eat at these stalls that they have no business going to or never have recognized. And that is like the bridge that happens. And it happens a lot. Not cherry picking stories, because that narrative I've heard so many times throughout the night market. And that's also like the point
That's great. Yeah, bringing the different generations together to paint a picture of it. So, you walk in, it's all of these outdoor stalls. Are they all the same size, the same measurements?
So yeah, everyone is under a 10 by 10 tent.
Okay.
And I provide those. You'll probably ask me later on, how are we different, or, what are other markets like, or, how we differentiate ourselves. This was really, I had zero experience in the food industry, zero experience in the event production, much less the event promotion industry. So I really kind of had to build the idea from scratch. And so much of what we do is just like off market, like the furthest away from the industry paradigms as you can imagine. But they're all essentially driving towards how do you make it affordable for customers, and in so doing, make it affordable for vendors. So we own all the tents. We set them all up every morning, starting at like 5:30, 6 in the morning. When the vendors arrive, they're assigned their 10 by 10 tent. They bring their equipment underneath it, and then it's off to the races. So yeah, it's standardized. We've marked, done it 250 times now. So kind of can do it in my sleep.
But starting off not being in the industry, not doing events, I mean, that's a huge learning curve.
It was. Oh my gosh. Like the horror stories from some of our first evenings where I had no idea what I was doing are pretty scary. But yeah, but it was also a blessing.
Well, what happened? What was that?
Oh my gosh. So, I think this story's been told quite a few times, but probably not for anyone watching this. First night market ever, 2015, April. First event I've ever organized, first market I ever organized, first to everything. And I was getting cold feet like a couple hours out. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is actually happening. I have
nerve-wracking.
I had no idea how many people were going to show up. At some point, I was telling my volunteers, it was all volunteers at that point. It's like, oh my gosh, should we cancel? Should we soft open? Should we tell people like, this is just a test run? I didn't know what to expect. I would have been happy with 1,000 or 2,000 people. Turns out 40,000 people showed up.
Wow.
Yeah, at least something like that. But I was so unprepared that I didn't know what I was doing. We had like 6 trash cans between, I do the math on that, between the number of heads per trash can. We had this huge stack. I was like adamant we have to have public seating. That's going to make people comfortable. So I ordered a huge number of picnic tables. And somehow I read online or when I was ordering them that they were like ready to go out of the box or something. So I was like, about 20 minutes before we opened, I was like, okay, now it's time to start opening these picnic tables. Took the first one out of the box. It comes with tons of screws and pieces that you have to put together. And I realized, 20 minutes out that each one is probably going to take an hour.
Yeah.
And so if you walked in the very first night in 2015, in the dead center of the night market, there's this huge stack of just like unassembled picnic tables that like I'd hope people would sit on, but like, no. And then, the electricity I got all these bands to play, but didn't think to give them electricity. So they were playing acoustic without wanting to play acoustic.
With 40,000 people.
Oh my God, yeah. And they can't even if they had a violin, they couldn't even use their bow because the people were jam-packed so closely together.
Oh my goodness.
So that's just sort of like.
How about food-wise?
The vendors sold out in like 2 hours. It was, no one was prepared. And so anyways, but it really proved that there was the demand for it in New York City. So that's just like the tip of the iceberg.
Well, that's an incredible, especially an endeavor like this, there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there. And a lot of times when you think about like that entrepreneurial spirit, someone's creating a company or a business that is going to, have huge dividends. You're going to make tons of money. Well, this is kind of like cultural entrepreneurship, I feel like, in a way. Because yes, like it's a business, but I also feel like it's very mission driven.
Yeah.
You're set up, you're a for-profit, right?
Yep.
But it's very, I don't know, something about just the essence of it seems very like mission driven to me as well, providing opportunities to people from all walks of life to share their, home country's cuisine, bring people together from all walks of life to enjoy that cuisine together, doing it in Queens, the world's borough that's so diverse. So I feel like taking the leap to do that from an entrepreneurial perspective, it's a lot of risk. And I can imagine the nerves going into it like that.
I mean, it is without a doubt a terrible business model, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it always has been a terrible business model. And the business model is so bad that it started off intentionally as a bad business model, right? It's true. Nothing about it is sort of profit oriented, and that was by design, right? Just to give an example of how bad a business model was, for me it was always about the affordability, and so I went out publicly and sort of said, via news, media, whatever, interviews, and also sort of implicit social contract that I would never make money on vendor fees, right? So whatever I charge vendors was only enough to break even at best, because I thought, if my incentive is to profit on vendor fees, they have, I'm just going to jack it up as high as the market will bear. Mm-hmm. And they in turn will have to jack up their own prices to consumers as much as the market can bear. And then you end up with this sort of 2 layers of profit maximizing, which to the consumer, if you look at some of these markets in New York City, you see the end result is just constant complaints about why is it so expensive? Mm-hmm. So I sort of took that incentive away from myself to sort of, force my incentive structure to be, whatever it is. So I also, to my credit, didn't expect it to last more than a year. Yeah. Right? If you start off with coming out of the gates with a terrible business model, and don't expect it to work, so So it wasn't so much of a gamble, right? Like I thought,
all right, so it's just an experience, something you wanted to do.
For sure, I sunk a bunch of money into it because it was worth chasing, right? Like I thought, the whole genesis of my believing in it and wanting to do it was, can I create the superlatively most affordable, most accessible, most representative space? And if I could do that, it was worth, almost whatever money I could throw into it because, this is for New York.
So if it's such a terrible business model and your idea was, let me just do this Queens night market, let me try it out the first night, you're like, oh, do I even want to do this? And then you think it's going to go no longer than a year. Why is it still in existence today? And at least from the outside looking in, so successful?
A couple things. One is probably stubbornness, right? Not refusing to let it go if there's a way to keep it going.
Mm-hmm.
So much about the affordability that the consumers see, there's just a lot of business decisions that end up going there. Like things like providing the tents for vendors, things like having storage on site. A lot of it is my own labor costs, right? Like I've shouldered a lot of, probably roles and responsibilities that most organizers, most companies, most producers would probably farm out to a couple other people.
Yeah.
And so my labor cost, or pushing down my labor costs, is a direct, directly feeds into the affordability. But it hasn't been easy. The first 5 years of existence, I didn't take a single day off. Like not even like the normal, like Christmas and New Year's, I was still working, trying to do everything I could to keep this thing alive. Eventually we got enough vendors to sort of get capacity so that when I'm charging vendors enough to break even, I'm actually breaking even. That wasn't true the first few years because, and then eventually we got a liquor license, which, for better or worse, people don't really drink at the Queens Night Market, which is great for liability things, but like not great for the bottom line. We got some companies, and 3 or 4 years ago, we finally got, the White Knight sponsor we were looking for. Citizens Bank came in. They were just breaking in New York City and looking for the best and coolest and sort of most community oriented things to get behind. And that helped a lot.
So how many vendors are generally there these days?
So on any given night, about 75 food vendors and about 35 art merchandise vendors.
So where are you finding the food vendors from? Are they just kind of home cooks? Or are they kind of caterers? Are they restaurants? Where are you sourcing them? How do you ensure that? Well, I'll get to that. But where are you finding them first?
They come to us.
Okay.
And part of this, one of the benefits of what happened opening night in 2015 was it was a super struggle at the very, before we open. How do you find vendors? How do you convince them that this thing's happening? For good reason. Like I would not believe myself either. So it was a struggle. So with the opening night, we had something like 20 to 25 food vendors, 10 non-food vendors, and the entire time I'd been billing, up to 100 vendors. We opened what it was, and everyone sold out in 2 hours, and everyone that was coming as a visitor saw the demand for this thing. And I got home the next day, Sunday, about 3 p.m. I'd gotten there 4 a.m. Saturday and got home 3 p.m. Sunday. And right before I went to sleep, I opened the Google Doc that had our applications. And overnight, we had received about 300 applications.
Wow.
Just overnight, from people coming to see what it was and then before they wanted to apply. So more or less since that day, we haven't had to go out and try to recruit. Like before then, I was like cold calling every restaurant and like doing everything possible.
So at first it was trying to find the vendors, but now because they've seen the success and everything about it, they're all coming to you. How do you choose which vendors come to the market? How do you select to ensure you have diversity of cuisine?
Yeah. 2 parts to that formula, and they seem really simple. Each in itself seems really simple, but together they sort of create what our sort of roster of food vendors. Generally, one, we tell vendors, if you want to sell food, you have to sell something you grew up eating. Okay. And that's just to curate the story, to make sure someone's not going off and just sort of doing a profit maximizing thing. They actually care enough about it that they want to sell it.
Yeah.
The second thing is that I self-impose this quota of no more than 2 vendors per country. So what you end up with is if someone gets accepted, generally they're trying to sell something from a country that we only have one or two representatives of that they grew up eating. And that sort of feeds this entire system. And it sounds very simple, but it puts a lot of guardrails on what we're doing. And the reason I do the quota, countries being a very rough proxy for culinary diversity, but the easiest for me to quantify is to force my own hand to represent as many sort of ethnicities and cultures as possible. So what the end result is, you come and out of the 75 food vendors are probably representing 50 plus countries every night.
Great. And so they're just like everyday people. Do some of them have restaurants? I mean, when I've been multiple times, I always like to kind of get the stories of different people, and they're really fascinating. But what do you see? What's the makeup of it? Have people started there and gone and opened a brick and mortar restaurant or a food cart or something? Or
the beauty, I think, of our vendor roster is it's almost as diverse as the sort of people we represent. Right. One of the interesting side effects or byproducts of having such a low barrier to entry in terms of the vendor fees is that you get people who are only in the food industry on Saturday nights at the Queen's Night Market.
Wow.
Sunday through Friday, they have their own jobs or they're retired or whatever it is. They're there to spend time with their family and share their food and their stories with New Yorkers. They don't think about it the other 6 days of the week. Like, they're just there. Which is such a weird phenomenon, right? Like, you go to every other festival in New York City or food festival, like, it's a hustle. And like, everyone's, how competitive with their neighbors and how do you turn the biggest profit? These subset of vendors don't even care if, like, they don't want to lose their shirts or anything like that. But, if it was a crappy night, it rained, they're happy. Like, they got to spend, 8 hours with their family. But we also have the entire gradation. We have folks there that want to take over the culinary world, and as long as they play within our price rules, they're free to try. So we've launched some pretty big companies now, and everywhere in between. Like, a lot of we did a count of, I think, 30 or 40 restaurants have come out of the Queen's Night Market.
Get out of here.
Some big names, some award-winning ones.
Anyone you can name drop?
I mean, I don't know. I feel bad. Then I have to name drop all of them.
Okay. Look, you have a great book that we'll talk about. Maybe some of them are in the book.
Some of them are definitely.
Let's talk about food. So again, now I know you can't go through and name every single person or every single vendor in there and their cuisine, but like, what are some things do you eat when or are you too busy working? And you forget at the end of the night, you're like, oh shit.
I virtually never eat on Saturdays. And when I get stressed out or have adrenaline rushes, the last thing I want to do is eat. So sadly.
What are some popular items there? Actually, talk about this before you talk about the popular items. Like, how many items does each vendor sell?
Completely up to them, as long as they still play by the same curatorial rules. Some vendors sell one thing and one thing only. Others have a pretty broad list of, hit list of, I don't know, Hong Kongese foods or, best hits of Guyanese food or, it's up to them. We advise them sort of informally as best as we can, but we don't make any, we don't force any.
What
are
some of like the popular dishes that
I don't know. I always play I usually go no comment there, but I generally the longest lines are, you can tell who's very popular, but it's very there's probably 4 or 5 lines that are consistently super long, but the rest of it is sometimes fascinating. Like, it depends on the night. I remember when I went to the famous Japanese fish market like 2 decades ago, there was like an article written about the fish market that, they have this like 4 a.m. sushi. They have a bunch of these stalls that sell sushi, like crack it on. And who has a line changes like every day, just based on like the 3 people who first got there, where did they line up? And then like everyone else thinks that they're the best and most popular. It's like funny line queuing psychology, but it happens at the night market too. I mean, there are most nights it's honestly so busy that everyone has a line. Yes. But on the less busy nights, that exact same thing happens. So you can like, if I'm feeling bad for a vendor who for whatever reason doesn't have a line, I would sometimes like seed that line by pretending I'm ordering, and like sometimes I don't like generate a line. It's interesting. But there are their favorite hits, but I don't want to call them out just because I feel.
What are some of the non-food vendors What are they selling?
The main curatorial premise there is to avoid mass-produced stuff.
Okay.
So we have, artisanal soaps. We have lots of art. We have some, very specific niche cultural imports, some jewelry, some retail food products. Pretty big mix of, we have henna, caricature, like some sort of caricature artist.
Is there a good flow? Like, is there like recommend, like how do you think to best experience? I mean, because I feel like you can experience it in many different ways, but is there a way to kind of walk through it? Because you also have to pace yourself. There's so many different delicious things that you want to eat.
Yeah.
So I feel like you can really go and spend, an evening there. It's you can kind of really hang out. You can eat, then you can hang out, and then you kind of go back to eating. Then you can maybe go look at some of the other non-food vendors and buy some stuff there. Is there like a best practices for experiencing the Queen's Night Market?
Yeah, the Queen's Night Market is funny because there's a sort of as you're talking about, there's an arc of the people that come, and 4 p.m. when we open is often young families. You'll see lots and lots of strollers and lots of kids playing, makeshift soccer games and volleyball in the field. And then it gets sort of more general. And towards the end of the night, it's much more adult, late night driven. I think it depends on your goals. If you're the kind of person that wants to come and just try as much stuff as humanly possible, you're only going to do that if you come at 4.
Yeah.
By 5 o'clock and 6 o'clock, most stalls, if not all of them, have lines, and at that point you're timed out because you can only go to so many because you're waiting 20, 30 minutes in line, or you come at the end of the night where there are no lines, but then you risk a lot of vendors being sold out.
Yeah.
So and then if you're there for the entertainment, we have a DJ from 4 till usually about 6 p.m. and then there's a really diverse mix of different types of musical and performing artists. So if you're there for that, you can just come at 6 and hang out in the field or hang out at the picnic table. But if you are, most people that ask that question are trying to avoid lines. And like literally come as soon as we open. And it's a huge space. There's 75 food vendors. So it takes a bit of time for them to generate lines.
What's the interaction among the different food vendors? It's kind of like the UN, right? It's like so many different people from so many different countries and backgrounds and everything. And while they have their individual, stall and business, they're obviously part of a larger event. So have you seen interesting like interactions between the vendors, or are they pretty much just like not interacting with each other? They're just head down working their stall?
One of the most rewarding parts of Queen's Night Market, I think, is the family of vendors. They are, they're self-selective, right? They've chosen to come to an event that is not based on profit. It's based on stories and camaraderie, and it shows in the vendors. Yeah. There are so many heartwarming stories about these vendors helping each other out. They're not competitive. They try to support each other. I found out, for instance, last year that one of our vendors was coming by herself. She was a lady that was selling Persian food. She was coming, setting up, doing the entire stall by herself. And some of that equipment can get heavy. I found out the entire season, her next door neighbor vendor, that entire team was loading up her car for her every single night, which is like, that doesn't happen. Usually at most of these events, you're jealous of other people's lines, or you're trying to steal their customers, and you're angry if they do well. And complete opposite. There are lots of dinners that happen on Sunday night and Monday night that I'm not invited to, but the vendors are. Like, the vendors get together, they have parties, they do all sorts of stuff together, and they become really close friends, and really just a huge family.
That's wonderful. And it's such a community that it's built among the vendors. My wife and daughter love the Persian vendors. I think last time we were there was 1 or 2.
There's often 2.
Yeah. That's great. That's so nice. What about the interactions with like the people? You were saying before how, the kid gets their grandparents to come. That's another thing that you must see so much of that must also be so rewarding, is just those interactions between, visitors to the market, the vendors themselves, but then even just, visitors among each other. Have you how do you describe that? Because I think that's also something really special that's happening.
That's probably my most important part of what I find most rewarding about Queen's Night Market is the community action. I wasn't really joking when I was saying 20,000 New Yorkers having a good time and a smile on their face. Despite the fact a lot of it you can imagine if you wrote it on paper would sound like it could lead to a bunch of angry New Yorkers, right? Like you're waiting in lines, there's like lines crossing, you're waiting 20 minutes for food. Easy to imagine someone being grumpy about that.
Mm-hmm.
But it turns out, for the most part, the people in line are talking to their neighbors, getting excited about what they're about to eat, whether they've had it before. We have community picnic tables, they're most often shared. People ask them if they can sit down. What are you eating? That kind of conversation happens all the time. Where did you come from? What line did you come from? And maybe also, where did you come from? And so there's just so much social interaction. Everyone feels, I think, like neighbors at the night market. And it's just really great. I was telling one thing I'm trying to pitch a story on eventually is like love at the Queens Night Market. Queens Night Market has become a total date spot.
I was just going to say, has anyone proposed?
Oh my God. We've had tons of proposals. We've had wedding parties there because they met. The first date was there, or they met there, or they proposed there. Anniversaries there. I don't know.
That's like the perfect New York Times love story.
I know, but it's hard. It's hard.
Love at the Queens Night Market.
I know. It's hard to sort of get these people. I mean, also sad though is like some of these, some of these marriages have dissolved since they happened. So I don't want to also be, I don't want to be in that story. But it's hard to track down all the people that have, right? Like you'd have to do an open call for people who like had a date, but like so many people I know that have gotten married are like, our first date was literally at the Queens Night Market.
I was going to say, that's a really good idea. I mean, it's good if you're in a relationship for just a date night to go walk around, but like for a first date too, right? You're going around, and it's like you're not stuck, just in one place. You kind of walk around. You can taste different things, and you
cheap
get
if you're footing the bill.
Yeah. And I guess you get to see how someone interacts in such like a vibrant, diverse place. That's very funny.
Yeah. I've been trying, like, I have a Google Doc sort of populated with stories I know, but it's just the people I know, right? There's thousands more that I'm
maybe somebody will be listening to this and they'll be like, we should do a story on love at the Queens Night Market.
I've been pushing that sort of subtly for a long time.
Do you go to other festivals, markets, doing market research?
No, it's funny. I hate lines myself. I kind of hate lines and crowds myself. So it's funny that I'm, running the Queens Night Market. Weekends are out. To be honest, Saturday I'm there often from like 6 a.m. to 4 a.m. I'm completely zonked out on Sundays. Yeah. But I did, I keep up with. I read it. So my market research is probably mostly about reading and reading reviews and watching recaps. But I did at the beginning, before I launched the Queens Night Market. I did nonstop. Like every time I get a chance, I would go check out some of these markets. And for me, what I realized is none of them appeal to me in all sorts of ways that I probably alluded to in talking about why I started the Queens Night Market. So there's very little recognizable, I think, in the way that we run Queens Night Market versus how these other festivals run. Most of them are, give us your vendor fee and here's your spot. Take care of it. Go find your own parking. Go bring your own equipment. Bring your own tent. All that stuff. We do our best to take care of all of that, right? Yeah. So we provide all the tents. We set them up. We've negotiated with sometimes the parks department, sometimes our landlord for parking for the vendors. We rent tables for virtually nothing. We rent chairs for virtually nothing, just to all make it easier for them. And that is surprisingly not industry standard. It's like the exact opposite of industry standard. And so, the things I learned from going to these festivals or these other markets, and look, everyone's got their lane and like it worked for them and they're probably much more profitable than I ever will be. But it's a different feel. The end result, you're talking about your experience at the Queens Night Market. And I'd like to believe that all the micro decisions we make towards affordability and representation and lowering the barrier to entry for vendors, impacts and feeds into the visitor experience. Yeah. And, I could be dead wrong, but I suspect a lot of that, the joy, like what's crazy to me is the amount of love and goodwill the Queens Night Market has generated in New York City. Right? Like I probably once a week I get an email that says my favorite thing about New York City is the Queens Night Market, which is just shocking to me because there's the Empire State Building, the Met, the Natural History Museum, like just all the restaurants and bars, and like you can name what, like inevitably probably like once a week someone emails and just says like, full stop, this is my favorite part about New York City. And that is, if you had said that 13 years ago, I think you're like completely out of your mind. That's not even possible.
Wow, that's amazing. I want to switch gears for a minute. You're on the board of the New York City Hospitality Alliance. You and I both sit on the board of NYC Tourism and Conventions. You were talking about how busy you are and how you're always working, but I feel like you also make time to be involved in associations, civic organizations, and being part of kind of the industry community. What's the genesis of that? Have you always been a person that was just like involved in things? And how is it, if at all, affected you in the Queens night market?
Good question. I was actually thinking about leaving New York City when I thought about the Queens night market. I was gonna move to New Orleans for a test run because I used to love New Orleans.
Me too.
Very different with a little kid though. I went last year or 2 years ago with my first kid who was a toddler at the time, and the experience was totally different, and I lost a little bit of my love affair with it. But I was always intent to live there for a little bit. So I quit being a lawyer. I'd given myself a year to figure out what I wanted to do or what would be fun, and what I thought was maybe going to New Orleans, test it out, easier pace of life. And I was like, well, I will give myself, I love New York City. I loved New York City then, but it was just a change of pace. So I gave myself 2 weeks to think of one thing to do in New York City that would maybe improve New York City. So, within that 2 weeks, I woke up one morning and thought, why does New York City not have a night market? Googled it, before AI, before ChatGPT, Googled it and tried to find the answer. And couldn't find an answer other than the bureaucracy and the red tape and all that stuff. But like conceptually, there was no answer. So it's like, well, instead of New Orleans, why don't I just stay in New York and spend a year trying to make Queens night market and, see what happens. And that was the genesis of like what I said earlier, like the Queens night market is this intimate love letter to New York City. So every decision I made about it was to support, to help, to inspired by, to celebrate New York City. And even the affordability piece was kind of an FU to New York City, right? Like I was no longer getting an employee paycheck. It was like, I can't believe how expensive New York City is, especially if you're not getting paid. So that was like the $5 price gap was like, this is the one thing I will give to New York City. The rest will be a celebration of New York City, but this is a pushback against, the cost of living here. The reason I stayed in New York City was really to create something that celebrated New York City. And slowly it caught on, and, I found myself, every day that goes by Queens Night Market, I was like, how else can I celebrate New York City? And, someone tapped me to be, or asked me to be on the board of NYC Tourism. And I, all of a sudden that sort of snowballed into all this other engagements, NYC engagement. And I realized, I'd spent professionally, at that time, 7 years or so, trying to create something for New York City. But now all of a sudden I had an opportunity to sort of be at the table and talking about New York City. And I really relished that. When you invited me to be on your board, I was very excited because, finally at the table. And these are both boards where what you say matters, right? Like I've been on boards where it's just sort of whatever happens. And like you're just a seat filler. But I found remarkable that your board and the NYC Tourism board, what you say can actually make waves. And, I adore New York City, and now I never move to New Orleans. And so, I love it, and I love New York City, and anything I can do to help.
We love those stories. What about like the entrepreneurial part, which you've definitely touched on in a few different comments, but you always hear the story of someone, you were a lawyer, and then you have this crazy idea to actually be like, I'm not going to be a lawyer anymore. Although I imagine you probably can use some of your legal skills and the work you're doing with the Queens night market with, your contracts and all this other stuff. But like making that jump, like what gave you the bravery and the risk tolerance to go from I'm a lawyer to I'm going to just try to fulfill this crazy dream and put all this stuff on the line?
Yeah, there's probably no easy answer there. What I would say is I actually quit being a lawyer long before I had the idea for the night market.
Okay.
Like I quit being a lawyer because I didn't want to be a lawyer, and I, wanted to open the door to other stuff. So it wasn't quite; those two weren't quite connected chronologically as closely as that. So, I was looking for a project, and I would say my risk tolerance was probably higher than a lot of people's because I probably had a resume that if it failed miserably, I could probably knock on someone's law firm door and be like, I need a paycheck, I need a job, I'm like decent at being a lawyer, like would you hire me? So I think I had fallback plan. And like I also, I also went to business school, so I probably could maybe knock on like a investment bank's door or whatever. So I had, I wasn't as terrified of like losing my life savings, which I did completely invest in this thing. But had I lost my life savings, which I also did doing this thing, I probably, could have picked up a job. I probably would have hated it miserably, but I probably could have. So I think that was, and I also tell this, I do a lot of small business seminars and speaking to like small businesses, and I always try to tell them to hedge their bets a little bit, right? Like the worst thing I could ever possibly do, and part of why our vendor fees are so low, right, is that I would never want to be part of a story of like someone devoted their life savings, even took out loans to start a business, and that fails. Like that can really screw your life over, right? Like especially if you have a family, and like that kind of, and the statistics of owning a small business in New York City are not encouraging, right? Like, I mean, that's why I was so convinced after a year, like this would be over and I'd go find something else to do. So it was a little bit of, I thought I had a plan B. So I wasn't, scared of, I was terrified of, like losing life savings sucks. But, I thought I could, pick myself up if that happened.
Queens is like the most diverse place in the entire world. So it just makes so much sense to have the night market in Queens when you're representing the diversity of all these, countries and these cuisines and these vendors. Is the model uniquely successful because it's in Queens? Does it work, in Brooklyn? Does it work in New Orleans? I mean, obviously there's things you haven't tested yet, but how much of being in Queens do you think has led to the success of it and the authenticity, right? Because I talk with other people in business, restaurants, and there is an authenticity to experiences that people sense, right? If you're being inauthentic, when you go to a restaurant or a bar or for some other experience, like people pick that up right away and they don't want that. So how much of like the model success is based on obviously a lot of factors, but being in Queens?
I think it really depends on what your goals are. I agree that authenticity and sort of intentionality matter a lot in the design of it. But if your goal, for instance, was to get out, 10,000, 20,000 people a night, you might be able to just do that with making an affordable thing, period.
Yeah.
Right. My goal specifically in representing New York City as a sort of cross section, it mattered how the vendors, the roster of the vendors and how that played out, and the geographical location probably also mattered a little bit. So, I think the Queens night market was built specifically for New York City and Queens, given our emphasis on cultural and culinary diversity. And that sort of in itself, you might be in the same room with, Toronto, I think also always tries to claim they're the most diverse city in the world. And I think there's some region in like sub-Saharan Africa that actually also claims the same thing, like that has like hundreds of nomadic tribes sort of in together. But outside of those two, it only works for New York City because we are sort of, we are a melting pot. And I've always been a strong believer that New York City is better for it. Right? Like, I'm not sure like everyone believes that, but to me, like it's such an asset.
I believe it.
Yeah. And I don't mean just like culinarily, right? Like it's sort of like vibrancy and like the sort of the beauty of walking through New York City is, I always, sorry about that, always think about coming across these neighborhoods where the awnings are in completely different languages, and like I can't make heads or tails of what those things say, but obviously they can, and that's amazing. Right? Like, so it was always a reflection of that, and sort of to pay homage to that. So, I'm definitely not. I still, despite having done 250 Queens night markets. I still don't consider myself an expert on events or event organizing or event producing.
So 250 Queens night markets, people coming from around the world to enjoy themselves, taste different cuisines from around the globe, vendors that you're working with from around the globe, interacting with the parks department and these different government agencies. And really, like you said, starting off without having experience in events and food and everything. What are some key leadership lessons that you've learned from having to build this Queens night market and manage all these different cultures, all these different personalities, and so many different, moving pieces in real time? Because at the end of the time, like you said, the first night, when one thing starts going wrong, it's like you run it around the field and between the vendors. It's a lot to manage. So
interesting question. I don't think I have any particular insights into leadership. I think one, I was sort of forced into it in some ways. If you don't have budget for a payroll, you're forced doing everything yourself.
Yeah.
And so that is not like it was. I was like not leading anyone, right? I was leading myself, and that was it because there was no staff. But I think getting people, I always say the night market one. I don't know if it has to do with leadership, but really following, like establishing a set of principles and like not compromising on them, right? Like I think there were so many, there's so many times I could have turned night market, and I still can, into a much more profitable business, right? There are things like every dollar I let the profit or the price cap goes up, I can actually take a pretty big chunk of like that extra revenue across the entire goal just by raising vendor fees, right? Or, I could charge $1 ticket or $1 entry for all the night markets. I don't think people wouldn't bat an eye at the dollar, but it changes the sort of the dynamic. And when you enter, like it doesn't feel like a community event. You're stopped. Somehow you got to do something. It's like a transactional thing, which I probably might have been able to retire by now if I had done that, but it just wasn't the goal of it. So at least in sort of leading whatever organization the Queens Night Market is, that's always been important. But I think that's one of the reasons we get our accolades and people care and cheerlead so much for us. And the other thing, I hope I'm like generally like nice, likable guy. Right? Like there, and part of that is like maybe by necessity, but it's true. Like I have to come up in front of a lot of different personalities, a lot of different agencies, and if you're a jerk, if you're not nice, like a lot of things are like, I need one person to say no or one veto and the whole thing crashes, right? So you have to really get people on your side. And I don't know if it's because I'm a good cheerleader or a good, just nice. I don't know what it is. Like, I don't know if I'm good at selling the vision, but, people have supported it. Like both officially and unofficially, people pick up the phone if I need something. Like you've helped support it. You got us our amazing digs for a press preview night. So I don't know. Try to be likable, I guess, and don't rub people the wrong way.
On the flip side, what have you learned from managing the Queens Night Market?
Oh, my
that's
gosh.
like changed you. That's had a real effect on you.
I am so in awe of small business owners, right? So I see 110 per night, and over across the season, probably 175 to 200. And, I probably didn't mention this, like the Queens Night Market has launched about 500 new businesses in New York City, meaning 500 businesses have started to be at the night market, did their first sales transaction, and some of them have gone off to do amazing things, and some of them have folded. But the effort that each of them puts into a business is like insane. Like, it's like starting a Queens Night Market themselves, but 5 times 500, right? Like it's just, I'm constantly awe of like the hustle and the grind and like the sacrifice and that it takes to run a small business. So that has changed me forever. Like I have so many more opinions about small businesses, both good and bad, since I started this thing. And again, like so much of this sort of lowering the vendor fees, not only to make it affordable for consumers, is to protect the small businesses that come in as vendors, because a couple crappy nights, at other opportunities in New York City, you might be out $5 or $10,000. At the night market, you might be out $1,000, right? And so, a lot of that. But what's changed me about Queens Night Market goes back to that civic engagement in New York City. Like Queens Night Market was started to celebrate New York City, but it's also made me fall in love with New York City, like all over again. So
Beautiful. Tell me about the book.
So the cookbook called The World Eats Here was published like month one of the pandemic. It was like we had all these book talks lined up and it was amazing. We're like, oh my God, there's so much buzz. And then the pandemic happened and some of them went online to Zoom and then some of them just got canceled. But since probably the year after we launched, starting in 2016, there have been people approaching me asking me if we'd consider making a Queens Night Market cookbook. None of them really worked out. It was too early. I didn't have the capacity for whatever reason. But in 2018, a book agent approached me and said, would you like to consider a cookbook? Been to the night market, huge fan. You've got all these amazing stories and recipes. Would you like to do it? And I said yes. And my wife at the time was a master's oral history student. And so I asked, we ended up collaborating. She did these amazing long form oral history interviews with all the vendors, which got distilled into a very small 1, 2, 3 page sort of blurb in the book. And then I I sort of helped transcribe these recipes into the book. And you end up with, I think 80 something recipes from 50 something vendors from 40 something countries. The accolades are great. Like I can't complain. I never thought we'd be like top 10 cookbook on this and this and this, but the sales are terrible. So
it's a phenomenal book. So everybody should go bump the sales.
It is. Like, it did eventually make it to second printing, but I'm pretty sure the first printing was so small that it's not really a claim to fame.
Listen, it's too pretty. That's still pretty good. What's next? Anything? I mean, I feel, what's next for the Queens Night Market for you? Any other plans, or is it just to kind of stay consistent and continue doing what has made it so successful and beloved?
Yeah, it's such an interesting question. I think about it all the time. Every year in the back of my head, I'm like, oh, this is the last year. It's such a grind. Like, you can't possibly do it to yourself or your family again to do it again. But what I find remarkable, and none of this is like meant to pat myself on the back, because like I sometimes feel forced into continuing the Queens Night Market, but it just somehow our insistence to stay the same in terms of like affordability and sort of representation and diversity becomes more important every year and becomes more valuable every year. So like by our staying the same, we've become more valuable to New York City, and the goodwill only grows every year. In terms of like the logistics, we're at 104 countries represented. I would love to get up to the 150 or 200 that are represented in here in New York City. Yeah. But that's a principled sort of exercise in trying to continue to represent New York City in the most we can. It's a struggle to keep the price cap. Honestly, like prices go up, labor goes up, the cost of ingredients goes up. So, we've had the $6 price cap for over 7 years now. And across that time, it's been, 35% inflation. Wow. And so that is, it's funny because people ask me all the time, like, they sort of ask me to come talk about, business innovation. I'm like, we are the exact opposite of innovation. Yeah. We're like trying to
just dig
we're digging our heels in the ground and like trying to stay where we are, because like that is the innovative part about like the Queens Night Market. It's like my personal obsession to make it the most affordable place in New York City. And again, like if affordability is your focus, like you really do become more important.
Assist, especially, listen, I mean, with the costs skyrocketing across the board. I know you said you provide, the tables, the chairs, the tents, which is really remarkable. Do you do anything with the purchasing of food or other equipment, or is that basically on the vendors?
We've tried. It's
complicated.
It's complicated. It's super complicated. And, one of the sort of bittersweet stories I had a couple of years ago, we had, I think this was maybe the year after the pandemic. I sometimes get very excited about some of the applicants. Yeah. And, one year we had an applicant from Papua New Guinea, and I was like, what? I don't even begin to know what they're eating over there. And she was a chef, like, that wanted to showcase her Papua New Guinea food, New Guinean. Sorry, I don't even know how to pronounce that. I was like, yes, you're in. Tell me what you want to sell. And she did this. It was amazing. I love reading the stories behind this kind of stuff. She was accepted. And then she couldn't find any of her ingredients,
Oh.
right? So like, at least at scale, right?
Yeah.
So you know, I buy them like from someone's suitcase coming over,
Yeah.
but she couldn't to feed, you know,
Yeah.
500 or 1,000 people a night. So she withdrew, and like for good reason, but that was a sad story. So like, just to say, like sourcing some of these ingredients has got to be tricky, and so like consolidating that into a, you know, bulk purchase is hard.
Got it. One last thing, really quick answer from you. Just the politics side of hospitality and politics. At a time when there's just so much global conflict and so much, you know, unrest and just nastiness, and you have a place at Queen's Night Market that really is the best of representing the world. Do you feel any obligation? Do you feel the market and you play any role in contributing to the betterment of just global society at a time of such unrest?
There's probably a real answer and a answer, sort of fakey answer. Like I would say the Queen's Night Market has come to represent like harmony, as you said, like social harmony and just sort of like loving your neighbors and celebrating your neighbors. But I do honestly think that the people who come to the Queen's Night Market are the ones that have already bought that Kool-Aid. Yeah. Right. So it's hard for someone who is not into expanding their cultural horizons and not into, you know, a diverse community, they're not going to want to come to the Queen's Night Market anyways. So I think we are this sort of oasis in this, maybe a beacon of social harmony and what happens when you get people joyously together, like the conversations and stories and the exchanges that can happen. But I don't really pretend that, you know, we are making a sort of impact, because I think...
Well, I think people that are causing conflict, if they went to the Queen's Market and just hung out with everyone, ate all the great food, talked to all the great vendors, it would be a more peaceful, better world.
I think the trick is getting them there, and I think they might get it a little bit.
We just got to get them to Queens. John Wang, Queen's Night Market. This is Hospitality and Politics, powered by the New York City Hospitality Alliance. I'm Manager Ridgie. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.